Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a precious place, a historical site. You're observing a drawing, a picture of the Rankin Building in Columbus, Georgia. And Columbus, Georgia has many buildings that fascinate this person, and maybe perhaps from time to time we'll be sharing more with you. But I think for you that enjoy documentaries, you want to let this building sink into your mind real well, because there's quite a project about to begin here. And a man that is not a stranger to you, Professor Joseph Mahan from Columbus, Georgia, is with us here today. And Professor, it's wonderful
Thank you.
to be back with you. Share a little bit with the
We're
folks
always
what-
glad to have you back in Columbus, too.
Well, it's always a pleasure.
So what we're sharing with you today are our plans for the research center for the Institute for the Study of American Cultures. And of course, the purpose of this center is for us to provide and bring together the materials that permit researchers to get at the element of truth they are seeking in regard to early America. But as we have now becomes very clear, there are many different approaches apparently to this truth. And so what we're doing is bringing together the material so that it will be available. And we do have a fairly wide range of things already, and others will come.
I have been very impressed with what I have observed and with the computer system and so forth. I think this is desperately needed. I really do. That these facts can all be brought together in one center where this information can be made available. And I certainly want to compliment you and your group and all those that are involved in it, and we like to think that we're one part of it.
Well, you should compliment yourself, because if you remember, you are a member of ISAC 1.
Absolutely. And
Second is you're on the board of advisors for this research center. So.
Oh, and I'm proud of that fact. Well, Dr. Mahan, can you tell just a little bit, share with us about the computer system, and then I know you're going to be sharing perhaps a visual aid here with the computer in a moment. What are the plans in that? How do they stand?
Well, the plans are simply to utilize the best contemporary technology that is now available to us and make possible to do something that would otherwise be impossible. The Library of Congress has, I guess, during the past 200 years been able to assemble most of the material that will be needed to do the type thing we're doing, but it's among a considerable amount of other material, as you know. So what we're attempting to do is isolate particularly rare and hard to get information and bring it together in a form so that people who need it will have it available. And the best use to begin with this is, of course, to use the computers and a data bank. And into this data bank, there are going things that begin with the first writings that were done by people who attempted to go throughout the country and to read the contemporary publications and get information on what evidence there was in the early 19th century of habitation by what they had to consider either Hebrews or early Europeans, because they didn't know the complete range of ancient peoples that did actually exist. And one of the books that has already provided considerable information that we have put in here, and from which other will be taken, is this little leather-bound volume by Josiah Priest, which was published in New York in 1833, this particular volume. And what we do is transcribe from it directly the sections that, in this instance, one that we've done particularly tells about the fact that in 1775, the first pioneer settlers in what is now Lexington, Kentucky, broke into a sealed cave or cavern, extensive limestone caverns, and found there hundreds of mummies wrapped in the fashion of the Egyptian mummies. And they brought them outside and unwrapped them, expecting to find all sorts of valuable items. And when they didn't find items that were valuable to them, and because they were mad at the Shawnees anyhow, who had been causing them trouble, they stacked the whole, perhaps 200 of these up in a pile and had a great bonfire, destroying them. And of course, this is simply one of the, not even the first, but one of the incidents that seemed to have collected all through the years, whereby we have simply and wantonly destroyed evidence that relates. But this, of course, relates to many other things that we now know that prove that North African, Eastern Mediterranean, Near Eastern, Indian, Egyptian, and Chinese peoples were here. And we thought for a long time that the list stopped at that, until we got the work of a Canadian lady anthropologist, Miss Ethel G. Stewart, who is sort of the most recent thing ISAC has had anything to do with. But we have just published this book under a new press, which we now have called the ISAC Press. And this book was underwritten by one of our members. But what is remarkable about it is that after 40 years of working with the Athabascan people, the Haidas and the Tlinkits of course, British Columbia and the islands, but also tribes in Alaska and even in the northern Mexico, including the Navajo and the Apaches, that she has taken 18th century accounts that these people told to particularly one French missionary and others, her own work out there 30 and 40 years ago, and then in libraries in Canada and in Britain and in Europe generally, she has traced them from Central Asia, where they were driven out by Genghis Khan, and they crossed to America in boats which they hired for that purpose in 1233 AD.
1233 AD.
And the case is certainly proved to such a point that there is really no argument about it. And of course, one of the things that has caused much of our confusion in the way of American history, pre-Columbian history, has been the strange idea that took hold in the early 19th century that cultures in America developed completely separately from those of the rest of the world, and that all came from descendants of a small, quote, hunting, wandering, food-gathering people who made their way across the Bering Straits either on the ice cap or when enough water was frozen into the ice cap that a land bridge was exposed. You could take your choice of which of this, but certainly incident to the last glaciation used to be when I was in school, that was 25,000 years ago. After 1958, the International Geophysical Year, it became clear it was only about 10,000 years. Nonetheless, that's when all the American Indians crossed, or their ancestors did. And it's still pretty well defended by the respectable academicians. But Miss Stewart has certainly thrown a great monkey wrench into that particular theory, because these particular people, the Athabascans, are the ones with clearly the most Asiatic features, even though it's not exactly correct to call them, say that Mongolian features predominate, because many of them are of Turkish origins. Many more are of Yuchan, or Kushana origins, the same people, a branch of whom I have spent the last 30 years investigating in this country. Anyway, they are the people that Miss Stewart has identified. She's proved her case, and we've had the privilege of publishing it. And they are from Asia. They do have the characteristics that anthropologists say, but they are, much of American culture had already come and gone before they came from Asia.
That is fascinating. I'm going to have a copy of that for my library, and I know many of my viewers are going to want to know the name of this. Mike, can we come in on that a little bit? Can you see that?
Anyway, it can be ordered from ISAC.
It can be ordered here from you.
Great.
And
the price, including the postage.
How much this be?
$40 including.
$40 including postage.
The Dean and Nadine, Indian Migration, 1233 AD, Escape from Genghis Khan to America by Ethel G. Stewart. And she's a Canadian lady.
Oh, yes.
Is that correct?
She was here in June for, you met her.
Yes, I did.
And we had a British tea for her, late afternoon tea in one of the historic houses here in Columbus.
It is rare that a work like this comes along. And I think as the pieces of the puzzle are fit together, and I must compliment you on your great work, The Secret. It is a great work, Dr. Mahan. And I know that I'm going to share a spot in my library for this along with that. And I look forward to covering it.
Well, I appreciate what you say about The Secret. But if you think so, as we used to have a certain governor of Georgia was fond of saying, you ain't heard nothing yet. There's a new one about to come out.
All right, that's good.
Which will add considerably to what The Secret says.
That's fantastic.
Because The Secret deals generally with the fact that there were relationships between these people and the ancient world. The one I'm doing now is called the Zoya, North American Sun Kings, and it deals specifically with the Sun Kings and what we know about them in this country and how they relate to what we know archaeologically and historically.
We'll be looking forward to that. Can you tell me, Dr. Mahan, on the computer program, I think this is excellent that even like books that are now out of print, and it would be impossible for someone like myself to even receive a work like this. But what a wonderful idea to be able to share that with people through a computer, or a computer set up whereby a person can research. Is this open to ISAC members?
Yes, it is.
Is there a special fee?
There will be. Much of this has not been worked out yet.
I see.
And you're about to meet and talk with our treasurer, Mr. Bill Morrison.
Well, wonderful.
But before you do that, I want to tell a couple more types of things that are in the computer and will be put into them. One is your company has been kind enough to film the past 2 conferences for us. These will be abstracted, and the subjects mentioned in all this will go into there. And of course, the original film is here, so it can be viewed or can be copied, the videotape. We are also, through the years that ISAC has existed, we have had correspondence, and sometimes extensive correspondence, with authors and researchers who are working on various aspects of the relationship of North America to the ancient world. And these that are not published will mostly be typescripted and put in whole. But we're also cataloging and listing the works of the authors who are ISAC members or who have been important in the research that we're doing. And these we call Magellan Scholars, and we're putting an extended biography, as he will tell you, and abstracts of their works and complete texts of original articles and things of that kind. So there will be a great deal in this index that is really at the very cutting edge of this research and is also not available anywhere else.
That's exciting.
So I think it's time now, maybe if we went over and let you talk to Mr. Morrison.
Okay, let's do that.
My name is Bill Morrison, and I'm going to take a few minutes and show you some of the capabilities that we have with the ISAC Magellan database and talk about some of the future capabilities. Our objective in setting up the research center is obviously for us to discover the truth about what America was long before we came on the scene. And we're going to use today's technology to improve everyone's ability to search and research that and try to tie together as many of the loose ends as we can. We have a tremendous amount of research that's going on in this area today, but unfortunately most people are not really coordinating their efforts with each other. It is our hope that through ISAC we can tie those people together through our database or individually, and so that we can all improve our knowledge of the truth. I'm going to switch over now and show you some of our capabilities with the computer. Our objective is to be able to disseminate this information as many different ways as possible, but before we can disseminate it, we need to be able to get the information into the computer and then do a fairly simplistic search to narrow down the information. What we've established with the ISAC Research Center and the ISAC search capability is exactly that, because what we have is the ability to search the information that we have in the computer in a number of different ways. We have, as Joe Mahan mentioned earlier, many of the old books that are no longer in publication. We're trying to get excerpts of newer publications and books. We will have the ISAC notebook, copies of the ISAC notebook will be in the database. Papers that have been presented at ISAC conferences and other conferences around the country. The ISAC report will be obviously in our database. And as Joe also mentioned, there are many scholars, what we'll call Magellan scholars, whose works we'll be keeping in the computer. And what we will have is the ability to go into each of these works and search. Let me give you a real brief example. Once the data is in the computer, we have a very simple search capability that will let us explore. And we can explore just the books that are in publication or the ISAC notebooks, research papers, information from the scholars, or we can search everything that we have in the computer based upon a keyword. And all we have to do is indicate what that keyword is. If, for example, I'm looking for information on gold, I type in gold as my search capability, hit the enter key, and of the information that we have out there, there looks like there are 13 files that have information about gold. And in each of those files, where the word gold shows up is highlighted, so that I can go from file to file and actually find the occurrence of that particular piece of information. When you start doing your research, you can search on a particular word, a phrase, a series, a date, a location, and the computer will congregate all the information that's associated with whatever your search argument is. Once you have this information and together, I can basically show you that we can go from file to file. Gold is highlighted here. It asks me if I want to move on to the next file to show where gold occurs. I'm going to indicate yes. And now I'm in the next file. Gold again is highlighted. And I just keep moving down the list to find the particular information that I want. Once I see some information that's of interest to me, it's just a matter of expanding this document to make sure that I can see it all. And if this is some information that I want to save for my own use, I can do something called gather. And I can highlight this information and save it into another file that at the end of my search, I pull up all the information that was pertinent to what my search capabilities were and what I was looking for. It's up to us to use the technology that's available, and this certainly gives us the ability to do that. And again, it can be on books, it can be on papers, or it can be on everything in the ISAC file. What our objective in ISAC and the Research Center is to make this information available in as many ways as possible. And that means we'll be tying into your computer systems to allow people to access our computer system, or if they have a question and they don't have a computer, they can call us, they can ask the question, we will do the research and send them the information. And this will all be tied into ISAC membership and research memberships, which we'll be discussing later. It's a very sophisticated system that will be very easy to use, and that's what we're trying to achieve with this. And if that's not the particular information I'm looking for, I can come down to others, move over, and find out where gold occurs. Makes it a little bit easier than researching book after book and paper after paper, and will save a great deal of time. We've got to do this because there is so much information being discovered today that requires a tremendous amount of research, and we've got to make that research, our time is valuable, and we've got to be as productive as we can.
I read an article that they found some iron furnaces and that they were working iron and making things. I don't know, I don't remember the state, I think Virginia.
All right.
Can you?
That's a great example. Let me take you through what you would be doing if you were looking for information on iron in the ISAC data bank. We have, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to search on books or notebooks or papers or reports, but for this particular one, let's search them all, and let's search them all for iron, I-R-O-N. That's not too hard. Well, there are 21 files associated in the data bank that have iron and discuss iron. And it even gives you a probability as to how often it occurs in here as to the likelihood. And what we can do is go through these and find information on iron. This particular one is in the ISAC notebook of September of '89, and it talks about bog iron and pre-Columbian graves. If you were doing some research in this area and you decided this was the information that you wanted, you could come down to here and we could start gathering this information. You might want to gather it. It's telling me to mark the text that I want to gather, and let's say that we want to gather these first two paragraphs. So we have indicated those, and we'll save them to a file, and it might be your name and today's date. That information has now been saved in a file. So we can now proceed and look for more indications of iron, and you can see how it jumps to each location of where iron is discussed. And let's say this is all the information that you wanted out of this particular file. We can come back over to another file talking about early iron in the Ohio furnaces. If this is also information that you want, then let's come over to here and let's save this also. We'll start here and we'll come down through those two paragraphs. We'll put it in that same file, and you can just keep proceeding through the information to find the information you're looking for and save it where it's appropriate. And when you're finished going through this, you have a summary that would have taken, I don't know how much time to go through otherwise.
I can see that you have a lot of information in here, a lot of books that people don't have to read.
We have a lot now, and our data banks will continue to grow dramatically over the next several months.
All right.
Well, it occurs to me that we haven't told you very much about what the Institute for the Study of American Cultures, ISAC, is, and I guess you assume something of its purposes from the discussion we've had of our research center. But on a much broader scale, ISAC was begun really in 1973 when about 70 people from literally all over the country, from Washington State to New York to California to across the middle part of the country, assembled at the village of Westville, 35 miles south of Lumpkin. At Lumpkin, south of here, at my invitation, to sort of share information that they had that there might have been pre-Columbian transatlantic contacts in ancient times and even more recently, but certainly before Columbus. And this was a very interesting group of people. I won't attempt to name all of them, but some of them will certainly be familiar to our viewers. People like Gloria Farley, for one, was there. Donald Buchanan was present. Dr. Clyde Keeler, from whose work we have here on the Kuna Indians and their moon earth religion, and various people who later met again the 2 years following. And they liked this site there very much because it was there were some motels in the area, but this is a living history museum. It's the village, a Georgia village of the year 1850, in which activities go on every day, and visitors come, but it's out from everywhere else. It's quiet, and we had a camp meeting tabernacle, a structure built in 1840 to hold the religious revivals in the South that were called camp meetings, which we are now quite sure actually was a later development out of the local Indians' green corn festivals, which were held at the same time and in precisely the same manner and to attain very much the same purposes. Nonetheless, this big wooden structure called a tabernacle was open at the side and ventilated so that it was really very comfortable. We had these meetings in October, which is a beautiful time of the year here, and it was free of any publicity, and we had not asked anybody of the opposite opinion. And later we were accused of being biased and several things, and we could truthfully say we were seeking the truth, but we wanted our portion of the truth that we were looking for then. But out of those meetings, it became very clear that among just this group of people that there was an enormous amount of information and research that had been done. And so some of them, I went to Pakistan the following year and spent 6 months working on material that involved the Indus Valley, because I had certainly come by then to believe that the Uchis and the Sun Kings generally here in North America were closely related to the people of the Indus Valley. The next year, a meeting of the same sort was held at Castleton College in Vermont, and Dr. Warren Cook, who was one of our first group, called this meeting, and it was a most instructive one. And by now, Dr. Barry Fell had begun his work and suddenly realized that writing had gone on in North America. The Epigraphic Society had traced it around all the rest of the world, but everybody had told them that there was no writing in pre-Columbian America, so they hadn't looked. And when Dr. Fell saw by accident the Bourne Stone at Massachusetts, in Bourne, Massachusetts in 1975, he read it like you read the morning newspaper. It said Hano was here in perfectly good Phoenician letters. And it had been known since colonial times. Even our scholars had called it the old Indian rock with Indian writing. Nobody thought about it, possibility of it being Phoenician, so they had never looked at it. Anyway, Dr. Fell was at the famous conference in Castleton in 1977, presenting inscriptions in Ogham, which by now these New Englanders had copied off of stones and off of their megalithic structures that are throughout the New England countryside, hundreds of copies of inscriptions in Ogham, most of which were easily read by scholars such as Dr. Fell. But to cap off this conference, they invited Miss Mary Ross, who was a British anthropologist with the University of London, I believe, I'm not positive, but one of the British universities, who was, of course, a great expert on Celtic Ogham. Miss Ross, to our amazement, got up on the platform and announced there was no such thing as Ogham in the Americas. They had shown her some of these strange marks, but it was very well-known fact that Ogham began in the British Isles in the 3rd century A.D., and therefore it could not be in America at any time, but more specifically, it could not be at a pre-Christian date, as was beginning to be given to these inscriptions. This was one of the remarkable scenes that I remember in connection with the whole thing. In 1979, we had a conference here in Columbus that involved the original group and the epigraphers and a great many other people, and this time it was called Writing in America Before Columbus. And there was just such an embarrassment of it from so many directions. that it became clear that we were going to have to go at it for a long time and in a sort of systematic manner. Of course, in the meantime, the occasional publications of the Epigraphic Society, called ISAC, were now devoted almost entirely to American inscriptions and articles about American writing. And not only had Celtic been isolated and well-defined and identified, it suddenly began being found in the Southwest, in Mexico, New Mexico and Colorado and western Arizona. And at about this same time, a group of the people out there went with Mrs. Gloria Farley to discover a really remarkable site that she had already found, and which contained extensive inscriptions in Ogham. And that site we will look at with some pictures very shortly. But then in 1983, there had been some other meetings and all, but in 1983, the group met here, and with the firm idea of beginning the kind of a center that would be able to gather information, the work that they were doing and that other people were doing, and get it into such a form that we could assimilate it. Now, we have gotten off the track a few times, but it was pretty clear understanding among all of us that we would be the brokers, sort of information, and not interpreters. To this extent, individually we can interpret, because truth has a quality that I'm sure Dr. Murray is familiar with, and that is it's awfully hard to contain. When you one time let it get loose, it may lead in a whole number of interesting directions. And we have been accused of not only being biased in that we haven't really asked for contrary opinions. I mean, so long as the opinion is not presented as being contrary to, but contributing, we're likely to listen to most anything. But I don't have a great deal of sympathy for somebody who comes and say it's got to fit into this particular pattern. So ISAC was to do only that, and we have begun. We had 150 members pretty shortly after we began, and some of these have come and gone, and we've added numbers and so on. But it became clear after several years of meeting that that the papers that had been presented at these conferences, beginning in the ones in Westville and at Castleton and at Salem, Massachusetts, and elsewhere, were themselves the source of a great deal of information. So in the last 3 or 4 years, we have begun serious discussion and planning of how we could actually get a physical center going in which there would be the kind of information and how best to make it available. Now, it so happens that on in the bookcase back of me here are some of the books that we are having one reason or another to work with right now, and a few of them I'd like to take out and show you, just as I did the two earlier. Now, this one is, of course, the book that I had mentioned earlier by Clyde Keeler on Kuna art. Now, this is the sandblast islands off of the coast of Panama. And to make it very simple, Dr. Keeler, after 17 years of going there each year and being a medical doctor himself, he finally got the confidence of their medicine men, and they explained the traditions of their medicine and the lore, and it relates very closely to the Eastern Mediterranean and apparently even to ancient Egypt itself. This one is one we sometimes are accused of not being on the mainstream of respectability, but we do have a great many friends and some members of the organizations that are busy studying Atlantis. And since the Yuchi stories tell us that the Yuchis themselves were part of this debacle at the end of the Bronze Age in the Bahamas, We are very interested indeed in the megalithic structures and other things that are being found underneath the waters there, particularly between Andros and Bimini. One of our members is Cyclone Covey. Dr. Covey is one of our, not only the Magellan scholars, of course, but he's one of the, now I guess about 6 or 7 people that we have given a special award called the Root Cutter Award. Dr. Covey not only has done some very interesting work on and written what I think is the first piece of American history directly from American sources, and this is his book Calais, the history that was read from the tablets that were taken from the Caliche out in Arizona. But he is one of the foremost scholars in the country on the Homeric period, the Troy and the Eastern Mediterranean. So much that we are doing, Dr. Covey is bringing together to interpret in the light of the history that he knows from the ancient world. Henrietta Mertz is again one of the root cutter people, but she was one of our original members. She died, I believe, the year after ISAC was founded. She was a Chicago patent attorney, but she had a capability of research. She understood the Greek language. She simply had the quest for truth wherever it led type thing. And among other things, one of her later works was this book on Atlantis, which she says included not only the Bahamas but the Southwest, I mean the whole Southeast as well, is what was Plato's sources were describing, and that of course the main big cities were on the islands. And I certainly, Ms. Mertz's work is being assembled every piece that we can get of it, so that her work will be available through our center. Here is a classic which we have been lucky enough to fall into some brand new copies. It's long been out of print, but there was a cache of them discovered, and we do have a few. This is Lost America by Arlington H. Mallory, and it's the story of Ice Age civilization prior to Columbus. In other words, he was the engineer who, on helping build bridges on the St. Lawrence in the 1920s, kept looking at those Iroquois and said, in particular the Mohawks, and said by any definition they are Nordic, no matter what anybody says. And going from there, he traced north, and then he got into and excavated 4 major sites in Ohio that were clearly iron furnaces. He was also into some of the ones in Virginia, and at that time Matthew Serling was the director of the Smithsonian, and he wrote a complimentary introduction. But beyond that, he said if Mr. Mallory's interpretations are correct, the whole history is going to have to be reevaluated. And indeed it is, because there was an Iron Age in America. This little book may not relate much, but it does in a very interesting way. It's called A Jewish Princedom in Feudal France, 768 to 900. And it tells from what the chronicles and the other sources, a beautifully researched book, that tells the story of the part of Europe from which apparently the people on Cyclone Covey's and Thomas Bent's artifacts out in Arizona tell what the situation was over there that they were leaving. And to make it very brief, they were tied in with the Arian Christians and very much persons out of favor with the Roman Church, and to improve his standing with the church, which did pay off well a few years later, Charlemagne, the new king of the Franks, proceeded to drive all these people out in the year 774 AD, exactly as the plates out there say they did. So this is the kind of thing that we're trying to do, but perhaps one that Dr. Murrow may find particularly interesting is this latest work of Henrietta Mertz, which was published after she died, and it's the mystic symbol. And it relates to inscribed plates that were found from the 1870s into 1915, 13 or 15, when very small burial mounds were excavated all across Michigan. And in various of them were engraved stone, copper, stone or copper tablets with clearly biblical illustrations and references, and written in a peculiar alphabet that nobody recognized. It was cuneiform on the metal plates, done with clearly a chisel of a sharp edge of some sort pressed in, but cuneiform writing nonetheless. Others engraved in a more customary manner. And of course, the Smithsonian and the academic community had a field day with these things, what forgeries they were, and what an industry it became forging these plates. Nobody respectable since then has looked at them, except Henrietta Mertz. And she has done a very good job indeed of showing that they are Christians of the 1st century A.D., mostly of Greek persuasion, in other words, people. And she doesn't attempt to translate most of them, except she tells you that the mystic symbol, and she derives it from the Christus initials, and that it appears on nearly every one of the plates, and so that is one of the books again. So this is the kind of information that all of these books are of limited publication. Many of them are out of print. As I've said, the Ireland and Mallory book, or at least we thought was out of print for a long time, but we do now have some of them in mint condition. And of course, there are the now 19 volumes of the Epigraphic Society occasional publications, which is the largest single cache of information research, but it does almost entirely deal with writing. And what we're doing there, one is that we published an index, a guide to the first 17 volumes, which ISAC now has, that was compiled by Warren Cook, one of our early members and the one who put together the Castleton Conference. And it, of course, helps in the research of the Epigraphic Society papers. And these will go into this one will go in, even though it is available. It's a very limited edition of it. But then many of these papers have abstracts with them, and as we get to them, we will put in the abstracts. But from all of this, it's very clear that there are more than a dozen articles of one kind or another, many of them by Dr. Fell himself, which clearly shows that the Egyptian influence was very strong indeed among the Algonquin peoples. And his most recent work in the ISAC 19 takes the Tunicas and two other little tribes related to them in Louisiana and Mississippi, and shows clearly that their language is very closely related to the Egyptian and Coptic. And he's also, in an earlier time, shown that the Micmac, an Algonquin tribe from almost the opposite outer fringes, wrote in a form of an alphabet that it had always been assumed or attributed to a missionary in about 1714 who developed the Micmac dictionary. It is nothing of the sort, the alphabet. It is the Hieratic Egyptian, the latest form of the Egyptian alphabet, used almost without modification. So that being the case, it will be no great shock to you when I show you certain photographs that I have up on the wall in the ISAC office, which we will do shortly. All right, behind me is an oil painting by a Lou Ferris, who was a friend of S.W. Brown Jr., of the Uchee Chief Samuel W. Brown Jr., 1874 to 1957. He was the last of the Sun Kings in North America. He never particularly boasted about this title, but in Uchee, he always used the title Zo-Pathala, which, if you understand Uchee, is Sun King. Zo being the sun and Pathala being king. I met Chief Brown in 1957 when he made a trip here, which was the original homeland of the Uchees. I made a particular effort when I read in the newspaper that he was visiting in Alabama nearby to go find him and talk to him. And it developed that my own background in history and in colonial history and in the American Indians stood me in very good stead indeed, because poor Chief Brown, then in his 80s, was very concerned about finding a historian. And evidently in his desperation, he thought I would do as well as any, or the best he could do. But here he's shown in his headdress that he picked out for the artist. And after this picture was sent to me by his daughter, Mrs. Tiger, I wondered why that particular headdress, which we would all, us know-it-all types of a later date, non-Indians, say, well, that's clearly a Plains headdress. What we didn't realize was, until lately, that the same order that produced these war bonnets and the elaborate headdresses on the Plains actually were Algonquin feather crowns that we have references to back to the 17th century. And that, of course, all the Algonquin peoples, the Siouan people particularly, and a few others that I would, for lack of a better term, call the Dravidian people, all had the same line of kings and the same priestly order among them. And Chief Brown is wearing several things that indicate that order and rank and things among it. This has been, in the 30 years that have gone on since then, has been a continuing interest of mine to research the material that related to the Uchees and to these other tribes, and I hope will eventually be my contribution to the ISAC accumulation of knowledge and information. But one thing in which we have attempted to help has been a cave that was discovered in Illinois in 1964, and which has been more the subject of more discussion than almost anything that I have ever been associated with. For what I considered good and sufficient reasons, the owners have consistently refused to tell people exactly where the cave is or to allow them to go there. And this has caused a considerable displeasure among those scholars who think the cave might be authentic. Most of the scholars, and the respectable ones, say it couldn't possibly be, because the art that we have seen from it is just not, according to them, American Indian. I have up here on the wall enlargements of 4 photographs made of some of these artifacts by Virginia Harrigan, and they happen to be the very first things I saw pictures of from the cave. And don't ask me here to go into all the details. I will a few. But when I saw these, I knew that the cave had to be authentic, that it had to date to a very early time, and that all of them related to the Sun Kings. And so I had them enlarged and hung them around Chief Brown's portrait, sort of suggesting they were his ancestors. And some of the recent Uchees that we've had here, who are knowledgeable of their history, were quite amused at the selection that I had made. But the Sun Kings, whether you find them in China or in Iran or wherever, their big totem seems to be the peacock and the peacock feather. And so when I realized that this character was wearing a peacock feather, this would arouse some suspicion. He also has on his chest clearly what is a thunderbird. And Ethel Stewart's book I mentioned earlier points out the importance of the thunderbird in the mythology of religions in Asia and so on. And of course, we've always known that the people like the Navajo and Apaches made a great deal out of the thunderbird. I knew that the Uchis did also, because the thunderbird is the great spirit beyond the sun. It personifies this, which is the supreme of all of them. And his right eye is the sun, and his left eye is the moon, and the lightning comes, of course, from when he flashes his eyes, and the thunder is his cry, and these things. So the thunderbird is another point of giving away. And then here is an inscription in what is probably Libyan alphabet from the North African coast of the Mediterranean. And the scholars who have looked at this, who know that alphabet, can't make any sense out of what it says, simply because it's written, I suspect, in the ceremonial language of the Sun Kings, with which they are not familiar, but somebody will have to be. Down here again, this is the period in which the sky is represented as the bull, and of course the earth is as the cow. And these are our totems of the Uchian kings. Also of the kings of Minoa. This is the Minotaur figure of Crete, and they invariably carry a thunderbolt, which this shows. Over here we have the Shah, and you pardon my back, I'm sorry, but here is the serpent, and the wings are feathers. Shah in Uchi has two meanings. It's either a serpent or a falcon, or a bird of such as an eagle that is a close relative of a falcon. So the Shah is the ceremonial word for the plumed serpent, or the eagle serpent combination. And of course the pharaohs of Egypt used this very same symbol. Why? Because they were of the same faith and order, if you'll permit me to say so. Certainly the name Shah is the subject of my doctoral dissertation, and will have a good deal to do with the book that I'm attempting to contribute very soon, called The Sun Kings. And then this, of course, is the spirit in the form of the bird, which happens to be the falcon, which is Horus, but is the bird also of the Uchian kings. They did not wear eagle feathers, they wore falcon feathers, and their aspect is war kings. So these I thought would be of very great significance to you. And this is the kind of information which we are assembling here.
We're standing in the courtyard of the Rankin Office Building in Columbus, which is going to be the home of the ISAC Research Center and Museum. These doors behind me will be the entrance to the museum, and in that museum we will have a large display area, and more importantly a very large research area. Most of our research will probably be done remotely by individuals either calling in or communicating with our computer, but we're also going to be establishing a very thorough facility here for people to come to Columbus and to research the elements of pre-Columbian history in the United States, or America. The area that we're in right now is going to be finished, and we'll have balconies on both ends of it. If we can pan in, the area that you're looking at right now will be from this arched opening, looking over into this glassed arch opening, which will be behind me, which is the location of the ISAC Research Center. With the balconies on both ends and with the numerous plantings in this area, it will be a very pristine location for people to come and enjoy their research. We hope that there will be some interest from the people that are watching in ISAC and ISAC's mission. We're after the truth in pre-Columbian history, and that truth is going to require a lot of time and a lot of research and a lot of dedicated people working in that direction. For those of you who are interested in learning more about ISAC or in joining ISAC, we'd like for you to contact us, and we'll send you a small brochure which just explains ISAC and has an application on the inside of it. If you can write to ISAC, which is the Institute for the Study of American Cultures, Post Office Box 1658, Columbus, Georgia, 31902, we'll be very happy to send this to you. We think that we have an outstanding educational opportunity, and we think that we will hope to do our part to correct and write a portion of American history that has not been there previously.
All right, hey, it's real good to share the time in Columbus, Georgia that we have with Dr. Mahan. I feel that it needs a little explanation. Why do I consider it a worthy cause? Because, beloved, a man and a group, the ISACs, have decided, that's the name of the organization, have decided that a home should be founded, that is to say, a location, where people in this nation that have found certain stones, pictographs and so forth, pictographs and whatever, maybe just a funny looking rock, have a place that they can lead into and a place that they can operate and join, which is to say, Columbus, Georgia, the ISAC organization. Information that you might want in joining this, they're working on a computer setup for members only, that you may share into the works of such men as Barry Fell, and even many works that are out of print at this time, or simply writing there for the information as a member. I think it's worthwhile, and that's why I wanted to take this opportunity to take you there, because many of you probably have input that you could put in this place that helps document that America was discovered long before Columbus, that there were people here. The American Indian documents that, all right? It's just real sad that some people don't consider the American Indian to be somebody, apparently, or it would seem that way. Let's don't be that way, all right? Let's study the history of our nation, and let us support and join, if we can, this organization. I think you'll enjoy it.